best around. No one's ever gonna get you down. You're the best around. No one's ever gonna get you down. You're the best. The Karate Kid, 1980-ish, on Netflix now. Must watch. Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Writing for the Timid. This episode is all about how to be a CRQ master with I says. CRQ, of course, standing for Constructed Response Question. And we're going to master that CRQ with I says. So here are some essential problems as to why this is a great topic for writing for the timid. The problems in this is that how do you create a 1 to 2 paragraph response to a literary text that uses textual evidence without using the word I and doesn't sound like a summary? What? Major problem. And how will pre-planning my response help me to be a better writer? This Writing for the Timid is going to answer those questions with, of course, a few key strategies and some well-placed acronyms. So some learning targets for this one. I can understand the purpose of a constructed response. I can comprehend the meaning of each letter in the I says format and identify parts of I says within a paragraph. And I can write a CRQ on a key element within the story of an hour using my annotations and leveled reading of the text. So, isn't a constructed response just a short answer? No. Constructed responses are not short answers. Why? Because constructed responses ask the writer to apply your knowledge and understanding in a short written form. Short answers are typically responses that are 1 to 2 sentences, and they typically do not require cited evidence to support. Constructed responses are 5 to 7 sentences, easy, and they always require evidence to support your response. And typically constructed responses can be morphed into full-blown essays. So there is a distinct difference between a short answer and a constructed response. The more you know. So let's talk about how to answer a constructed response. And we use the clever acronym I says. I is the introduction sentence. R, restate the prompt. A, answer the prompt. C, cite evidence. E, explain evidence. And S, sum up for the reader. So let's talk about I. I is your introductory sentence. VIP number 1. Your introductory sentence is never a summary sentence. Your introductory sentence, however, is one sentence introducing the reader to the text you are reading. You're literally giving the reader just enough information so they will understand what the text is about. Now, there are 2 types of introductory sentences. You have the gist, and then you have the definition. Let's talk about the gist. The gist literally is where you give the reader enough information. You give them the gist of the story. VIP number 2, you always assume the reader has never read the story. So in your gist sentence or your introductory sentence, you always want to give the title of the text. You also always want to give the author and then in one sentence summarize the main point of the text that you are writing about. That's the gist introductory sentence. The second type of introductory sentence is the definition sentence. This is very specific, especially when you have a constructed response where you're being required to discuss and analyze a specific literary term or element that is in the story, like symbolism or irony or imagery. So that is when you would define the term for the reader, because once again, tip number 2, you always write assuming the reader has never read the story. Let's look at our CRQ example. Why is it a bad idea to bring a lamb to school? This, of course, is the text that we did a leveled annotating on in our previous episode. So now we have a CRQ on that. Here's an introductory sentence for that prompt. And Mary had a little lamb. Mary brought a lamb to school despite the rules of the school. Despite it being a little repetitive with school, it served the purpose of an introductory sentence. It gave me the title. It also gave me a gist of what happened in the story. Let's move on. R. R stands for restate. Restate literally means what it says. You're going to reword the question, aka turn that question into a statement. The restate is the introduction to your answer. And the restate sentence always ends with because. For example, it is a bad idea to bring a lamb to school because. Notice all I did was knock off the why and is of my prompt and pretty much said it is a bad idea to bring a lamb to school, and then I tacked on the because word. In our extension lesson, you will be practicing working with some restate questions, so be ready. Now let's go to the second part of the restate, the answer. The answer is always going to give a broad answer to the prompt. You never want to give anything away, and that is VIP number 3. Your answer should never give the entire point you're trying to make away. That's not what the answer is for. The answer is bam, direct and specific. It's one sentence only. R and A in the races are usually in the same sentence. There are exceptions, but the general rule is your R and A combined make one sentence. So it is a bad idea to bring a lamb to school. That's my R. Here's my A. Because the lamb could be a distraction to the other children trying to learn. Why is it a bad idea to bring a lamb to school? It is a bad idea to bring a lamb to school because the lamb could be a distraction to the other children trying to learn. So that is why R and A are usually in the same sentence. They just flow together. For example, pause and literally write a period after school, scratch out because, and then start a next sentence with the lamb. You see how it doesn't flow anymore? That's why we put R and A in the same sentence. Now let's move on to C. C and E I like to call the meat and the potatoes of your constructed response. So the C is where you pull evidence, aka a direct quote, that supports your R and your A. Now your direct quote is always going to be placed in quotation marks. Your cited textual evidence always will begin with a transition word or phrase. Don't forget the comma. What transition words or phrases, you ask? For example, comma, according to the text, comma, the author states, comma, the text states, comma. Don't forget that comma. Lastly, always give the number of examples the prompt asks. If the prompt asks for one example, you just give one. The reader doesn't want to hear multiple examples. They just want to hear the one because that's what they asked for. If they ask for 2 or 3, you give them 2 or 3. VIP number 4, give what is asked. Don't overgive, just give. If you pick the best and strongest piece of textual evidence, you won't need to give a lot of textual evidence because the one that you give is strong enough to support your answer. E. E, once again, if C is the meat, E is the potatoes. E is where you explain your answer. And VIP number 5, it is the hardest letter to write because typically what I find in my timid writers is E is where you begin to summarize the entire story. So VIP, your next VIP, it is the hardest letter to write because you have the strong inclination to write a summary, but your explained sentence is not a summary. Your explained sentence answers one question. Well, what does that prove? That being your C. So you explain how the quote supports the answer you have provided. This is not a summary of the text, I'll say again, but a specific elaboration on how the quote answers the question. Also notice, this is the first sentence that is going to be more than one sentence. It should be minimum of 2. So let's go back to our example. According to the text, that's my cite, the lamb makes the children laugh and play. That's my C. Here goes my potatoes. If a child is laughing and playing, they are not learning. The laughing and playing may also cause the other students not to learn because they are distracted by the lamb. I literally explained why laughing and playing supports my answer. I did not give a summary. I just explained what my C proves. So that's E. Last letter, S. S is my favorite because we summing up, baby. When you sum up, you bring the reader to a conclusion that you reached. In the end, your sum up sentence is where you persuade the reader to get with what you given. So in that sum up sentence, you provide one final explanation that states why your point of view is valid. Last VIP. Always begin your sum up sentence with a transition word or phrase, like therefore, or in conclusion, finally. And there's a whole list in your writer's notebook, so please refer to that. The biggest thing I can tell you about the sum up sentence is that it should create a drop your mic ending to your paragraph that gives the reader a sense of closure. And just like your E sentence, your S sum up sentence should also be 1 to 2 sentences. So that is Ray says. Ray says. So the last thing I want to talk about is how do you write a constructed response? This is where the pre-planning comes into play. So when you get your first constructed response prompt, you want to read the entire question or prompt. And normally your teacher will give you a choice of 4 prompts. When you do that, you want to identify and underline keywords in the question, such as explain or elaborate or illustrate or define. That's another one that's not in this particular video, but define is another one you want to look out for. Make sure you understand what the prompt is asking you to do by restating the prompt in your own words. The next thing you want to do is you want to list items you should identify in your answer. And the most important bullet point is you want to list facts and examples that will support your answer. Now, if you did a good, thorough, leveled, basic, predictive, analytic reading and annotation of the text you're doing a constructive response on, bullet points 4 and 5 should be a breeze for you to do. So hopefully this is making you on your way to being a CRQ master. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, keep learning, keep growing. Peace.